Naomi here, and I'm back for another round of renovation tips. So are you ready to start renovating, but you're not sure what sort of things you can and can't do to a particular property? Have you found a perfect property, but you don't know how close you can get to the neighbour's fence with a deck that you want to put on? Is the kitchen right for renovating and for a refurb, but you're afraid that if you knock down a wall, you might end up getting in trouble? Now, it's totally okay if you're freaking out a bit about these things, as there are so many rules and regulations when it comes to construction. But I'm here today to let you know that those rules aren't as daunting as they seem, and with a bit of preparation, you won't be left with a half-finished renovation down the track. So, every renovation project is very unique, and it depends on the scope and the complexity of the project. And each of the projects, regardless of whether you're doing something cosmetic, like sprucing up a kitchen, or something structural, like adding an extra bedroom or extending a living area, needs to follow a set of rules. And if those rules aren't followed, well, you could end up being slapped and in a little bit of trouble from the Building Code of Australia and the regulations that govern our construction industry around our country. But that's not why you're here today. To avoid that scenario, I want you to instead learn about how you can make a nice profit in renovation, renovating inside the rules. So to make things a little easier, I'm going to break it down a bit for you. In Australia, we have two main sets of rules. We have many, but two main ones. The first one's called the Australian Standards, and the second one is called the Building Code of Australia. Now, to make things a little easier, I'm going to break it down a little for you. There are a lot of regulations in our country at different levels, but we have two main sets of rules and regulations in Australia. So the first is called the Australian Standard, and the second is called the Building Code of Australia. These are your two building Bibles. But, you know, unfortunately, these building requirements and specifications, they're not small. They're not something you can read in a day and memorise. But that's pretty understandable considering they cover all possible types of construction work that go on in our country. They need to be really thorough, and they need to ensure that everyone is on the same page when it comes to building and safety. So let's take a look at each of these ones separately. So the Australian standards, these can refer to mathematical things like specifications or procedural requirements. They're used to provide a baseline level of safety for houses and buildings and everyday objects. That means anything from glass thickness to slip resistance to treatment of timber and building facades to the reliability of toilets, taps and ovens, cooktops, you name it. That all falls under the Australian standards. For example, if you're renovating a bathroom, there are many things that you'll need to comply with from the Australian standards. The Australian standard can also include the actual quality of items like range hoods, toilets, taps. All these things need to comply with Australian standards, and they will fall under the manufacturer's responsibility. But when it comes to bringing those items into your house and installing them, there is a level of responsibility that you need to be thinking about as well. The next one is the Building Code of Australia, so the BCA, that's what it's commonly known as. So the Building Code of Australia generally covers technical aspects of the design and the construction of building, including renovations. So while the Australian standard talks about maybe window loadings and thicknesses of glass, the BCA will be talking about actual window sizes. So some see the BCA as not quite as mathematical as the Australian standards, but these are specifically designed to be implementable and practical, used by architects, builders, certifiers, engineers to make sure that our stairs, our ceilings, our balustrades, that they're designed to comply, be safe and be practical. So for example, the Building Code of Australia has a set of rules around different ceiling heights that we need to have in different spaces of our properties. So depending on how we use a space will depend on how high we need to make the ceiling in that room to meet the legal requirements of the BCA. So that means if you're like knocking down a wall and extending a living area and there may be some new work, you need to make sure that the ceiling heights in this new part and the original part of that living area meet specifications, just as one example. So just like most rules and regulations, the BCA changes from year to year. And that's because there are always new things being discovered, there are new safety practices being established and implemented, and there are new materials being designed. But all this newness means that you need to keep up to date on these requirements and, to keep on top of the BCA and what they're referring to in the Australian standards can be quite a task. So if you've already done your research, say maybe 5 years ago, then it's probably time that you brushed up on that. And one of the best places to do this is looking into your team, either talking to your builder or talking to one of your certifiers. Now, one of the other things to keep in mind is that these aren't the only regulatory bodies of renovation in our country. These are at a national level. Once you start to move from state to state, you'll also find that there are different regulations and rules at a state level as well as at a council level. So make sure, as part of your preparation to renovate, you also look into exactly what rules and regulations are going to be affecting your renovation in your area. Your building certifier and your licensed builder can be an amazing asset for you to be using ongoing to make sure that you're complying with every standard that you need to do, producing quality, safe, and highly profitable renovations. Thanks for joining me. Did you know I wrote a book all about renovating to create wealth and freedom in your life? I've added the link below in the description for you. Enjoy.